My wife, Rachel, has always been ruthless in her business. She built her career on strategic choices, cutting losses, making difficult decisions with the precision of a surgeon. I had admired that about her once. But when that icy precision was directed at you, admiration had a way of shifting to something else. I sat across from her in her office, the glass walls behind her revealing the towering skyline, a monument to her ambition. Everything about her screamed control. The pristine white blazer, the way she reclined in her leather chair, the perfectly manicured nails tapping softly against the desk. She cocked her head slightly, observing me, enjoying the smug satisfaction that comes when you think you're untouchable. Then, with a slow, purposeful grin, she spoke the words that shattered everything. "You'll be training my lover to be your replacement, Tyler." She watched for my reaction. I gave her nothing. She expected anger, betrayal. But after a moment of silence, she continued, her voice silky smooth. "We're letting you go, professionally, after 12 years. As if this wasn't personal. As if a boardroom full of voices had come to this decision, and she was just the messenger." I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because questioning her would have been weak. Arguing would have satisfied her. Instead, I let a small, knowing smile brush my lips. And for just a fraction of a second, I saw uncertainty in her eyes. She had expected a fight, rage, desperation. Any of those would have given her the high ground. But instead, she encountered something she didn't expect: acceptance. People like Rachel confuse calmness with weakness. She didn't know she had already lost me 3 months ago. Still, I kept my voice even, folding my hands in my lap. "Before I leave, I'll make sure he's well trained," she smirked, leaning back, crossing her legs, relishing the moment. "I knew you'd handle this professionally. Too many people get emotional when they're let go." That was rich. Coming from someone who made every decision based on emotion but masked it with a layer of ice. That was the difference between us. I made decisions without letting my feelings guide me. And it hadn't always been this way. This company, it was never hers alone. It had originally belonged to her father, Charles Davidson, a man who built this business from the ground up. He had trusted me, treated me like a son. And when I married Rachel, I thought we were building something together. But when Charles got sick, everything changed. Rachel had made it clear she had no intention of sharing. At first, the signs were subtle. Meetings where my authority was undermined. Decisions made without consulting me. She couldn't fire me outright. She knew I had too much credibility, too much respect from the people who truly ran this company, so she boxed me in, pushed me into a smaller and smaller role, until she finally had the courage to push me out. Completely. And I could only imagine him, her new lover, thinking he had won something. Thinking Rachel choosing him over me meant something. I bet he was texting his friends right now, bragging about how easy it was to take my job. Poor bastard. I stood slowly, adjusting my cuffs. I assumed HR would send me the paperwork by the end of the day. Rachel stood as well, circling her desk, stopping just a foot away from me. I could smell her perfume, harsh, expensive, the same one she'd worn for years. She was enjoying this. For Rachel, the victory wasn't complete until she could look me in the eye and say it. I won. She needed to see me break, to see the moment. I realized she had beaten me. I held her gaze, and then with the faintest smile, I simply said, "I suppose tomorrow will be interesting." Her grin didn't waver. "I'm sure you'll land on your feet." Oh, I would. In fact, tomorrow. I wouldn't be walking into that boardroom as a former employee. I would be walking in as the new owner. I turned, stepping out into the hallway without another word. As soon as I did, my phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer, James. "Paperwork is filed. Board meeting set for 9 a.m. I slid my phone back into my pocket and exhaled slowly. Rachel had made her move. Tomorrow was my turn. First of all, I would like to know what was so necessary that you had to break our schedule when she was playing. Although it was chilly, I could feel that she was tense in her shoulders as she tried to piece together what was going on. Assembling a pre-assembled puzzle, I drew out a chair across from her. James cleared his throat. As of this morning, Davidson Enterprises' ownership structure has undergone substantial adjustments. A meeting has been set to discuss those adjustments. I gripped my hands together as Rachel scowled at the ownership structure. Taking my time, I said, "As you can see, there has been silence for the previous few months. Investments have changed. Shares have been exchanged. Acquisitions are taking place behind the scenes. And as of this morning, I saw her make the connections as those transactions were completed, her gaze narrowing. What are you talking about?" "Regarding Tyler," I grinned. "I'm referring to MKT Holdings." Her whole body tensed up. James placed a pile of papers on the table, and the board members leaned over to examine the pages. As they read, their whispers became louder, and Rachel's eyes widened with each page. Her look changed, from bewilderment to disbelief to pure, unadulterated wrath. She swiftly grabbed a file and scanned it. "This is a joke," she whispered. James adjusted his glasses. "But it's not. 3 months ago, MKT Holdings acquired a controlling interest in Davidson Enterprises. This morning, the acquisition was officially completed." Rachel's breathing increased. She turned to face me and spoke in a lower, more menacing voice. "MKT?" Leaning back in my chair, I watched her as she processed it. It was meticulously named after my initials. Tyler Michael Kingston. As the revelation dawned on her, her lips slightly parted, she whispered, "No." I nodded. "Yes." She had never guessed. There was silence in the room as the board members looked at each other, some barely concealing their gratification. They had witnessed Rachel's destruction of this business, watched as she burned it down piece by piece, but they had been powerless to stop it. Her voice rose. "This isn't legal! You don't have that amount of money! You couldn't afford this!" James opened another document. "Actually," he said calmly, "every transaction was conducted transparently and lawfully. The SEC has already been informed." Rachel's hands balled into fists. "You cunning little—" I cocked my head cautiously. "Rachel!" She turned to them in desperation, but the board only watched. "You can't let this happen." There was a lengthy pause. Then one of the senior board members, Janet Shunn, spoke. "No, Rachel." Rachel's face became pale. "This was your father's company, and you've spent the last 3 years destroying it." The other board members nodded in agreement. Janet continued, "I move to vote on new leadership." "I second that," I said. Another board member added, "Motion carried." Rachel's eyes flashed around the room, searching for supporters. She found none. She had alienated everyone who could have saved her, burned every bridge. Now she was alone. "The vote is straightforward," I said. "Those in favor of removing Rachel Davidson as CEO, raise your hand." One by one, hands went up. Rachel sat there, shaking her head slowly, frozen. Her whole empire fell apart around her. "You can't do this," she said. I met her gaze. "It's already done." Security entered the room. Rachel's chest rose and swiftly collapsed. Her hands clutched the table's edge. "Tyler, don't do this," I looked at her. "You did this." Her voice turned harsh. "I built this business and you're just trying to claim credit for it," James interrupted. "Mrs. Davidson, you need to leave the premises." Rachel turned to security. One of the guards hesitated, but in the end, he nodded. "Please come with us, ma'am." Rachel pushed back her chair angrily and shot me a hateful look. "I'll fight this. I'll sue you. This isn't over." I remained calm. "You'll do whatever you want, Rachel, but you'll do it from outside this company." She opened her mouth to speak, but stopped, because she had lost. Eric was waiting outside the boardroom. His face was pale, his mouth slightly open. Rachel hardly gave him a glance. Her eyes, slightly unfocused, looked as though she had just realized she had bet on the wrong horse. I pushed past him, letting the weight of the moment settle. Then, I exhaled softly. I stood up. Shall we discuss the future of Davidson Enterprises? And just like that, the company was mine.